Hello, this is Chala Dincoy, CEO and founder of The Repositioning Expert, here with another episode of the podcast Naked Marketing. I'm here with my guest, Lisa Wise. How are you, Lisa?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
So tell us who you are, what you do, and who you help.
Okay. My name is Lisa Wise. I am the CEO and founder of Flock DC, which is a family of real estate management companies. We manage over $2 billion in real estate in Washington, DC proper. We focus on high quality units that are mostly residential, but some commercial as well. As a company, we consider ourselves a purpose-driven company. We put people in place out of profit. And for us, what we want to do is really make the world a better place. And we do that through offering great real estate, great experiences, and doing everything we can to make a big difference in our community.
Very cool. Now, how did you get into this?
Yeah, well, I had a nice run in nonprofit management. I spent 15 years working in the healthcare nonprofit space and the environmental nonprofit space. And the work was really meaningful and powerful for me. And I always felt like I was supposed to be in a mission-driven and sort of purpose-driven space, making a difference. But when the recession hit in 2008, I realized that I wasn't sure I was doing much more than creating jobs and maintaining jobs. And I didn't know that I was really making much of a difference with my work at that time. And I had purchased a number of rental properties over my lifetime and had kind of managed those on the side. And I'd had a few people ask if I would manage their properties on the side. And I felt like that was a real inflection point for me personally, whether I wanted to continue with a nonprofit career and kind of weather the storms of different economies and, threats to different issues, and felt like, my entrepreneurial spirit was a lot more alive than I had thought it was. And it was probably time for me to think about pursuing a dream I'd always had, which was being my own boss and owning my own business. And so I decided at that point I wanted to start my own company and sort of go all in on that company. And so we decided with my business partner at the time, we started Nest, and Nest was our first brand. We started managing individual rental properties, one unit at a time, and then fast forward 12 years, and here we are now managing this $2 billion in real estate.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I totally get the world of nonprofits, and then I get the world of, being a property manager, but I'm having a hard time putting the two together. Explain to me what the difference is between what you do and what, let's say, a property manager here in Toronto does.
Yeah, well, for me, I think it became clear that when people are having great experiences in their homes, that they have better lives. And when people are feeling safe and secure and taken care of in those homes, that I get a chance to make a real difference in people's lives every single day. And that has sort of always been our North Star as a management company, is creating great living experiences. We believe that when people are happy where they live, they make better neighbors. And when you have better neighbors, that leads to better neighborhoods. Better neighborhoods leads to stronger communities, and stronger communities lead to more robust and sustainable economies. And that's better for everyone. And so, I think we've all learned during the pandemic that home is everything. And when I get to play a strong role in people having that great living experience and feeling safe where they live, then for me, I think that there's nothing more purpose-driven than that. And so, it's in a for-profit landscape, I think the values of being in a nonprofit environment certainly carry over for me. And so I was able to marry the two. And because our company is so committed to and thoughtful about how we make a contribution to our community, I think we were able to sort of find the sweet, elegant intersection between the two.
So to that point, how do you make a contribution to the community?
That's
through what you
one of my favorite questions, Chala. We have a number of different things we've been doing since the very beginning, and part of that just starts with very traditional volunteer work. So, and you talked a lot about marketing, and this is from early on, because we didn't have a marketing budget. We decided the best way to create visibility was to be visible in the community that we were serving, and so we did everything from walking from one end of our neighborhood to the other, doing trash walks and cleaning up our neighborhood, to painting other nonprofit buildings who couldn't afford to hire a company that would clean up their facades, to doing tons of food drives, walking dogs for the Humane Society. We would we helped build playgrounds, we installed landscaping for nonprofits. So anything that we could do that we knew our sort of physical labor and our um, strong team spirit could make a difference, we were out there doing that work. We've always been really good at building a following on Facebook. So we'd have newsletters go out once a week. And typically what we'll do is highlight another business or organization and what they're doing in the community right now to give them visibility, and having conversations with other fellow entrepreneurs and nonprofits. And so that kind of exposure, I think, did two things. It helped create more visibility for them, but it also established us as a company that like truly lives our values.
Mhm.
Early on in the company, we started a program called Birdseed, and Birdseed is at that time, and it continues to offer micro grants to what we call doers, makers, and disruptors. So every quarter, we'll spend $2,500 and we'll sponsor an idea that someone has in the community. And you don't need to be a nonprofit in order to be eligible for the dollars. You just need to have a cool idea that can usually get done within 3 months. And the big the big caveat was that your application couldn't be more than 1 page, including the budget. So what we couldn't do was read hundreds and hundreds of pages of grant applications. So we had a 1 page application, and each round we'll usually get 40 to 50 applications. People have so many cool ideas, and we funded everything from bicycle repair stations in neighborhoods that didn't have them to murals. We funded a guy who his grandmother had a hot sauce recipe in Washington, D.C., and he was growing the tomatoes on rooftops around the city, and he wanted to package his hot sauce, which is so cool. And we didn't want him to have to pay taxes on the $2,500. So we just had all the bottles shipped to our offices. People were like, why do we have so many hot sauce bottles in the office? And I was like, it's good. We just didn't want to have him pay taxes. So we all helped him get the bottles to his house. And so one of the last programs we sponsored was a woman who was doing birthday parties for kids that are homeless. And we did Cinco de Mayo grants. And so all these really cool projects that I think otherwise wouldn't have found funding home, right? If it weren't for us saying like, this makes a difference to us, and we want to make sure that we can contribute to really interesting things unfolding in our city. When George Floyd was murdered in 2020, and we're in the midst of the pandemic and the racial reckoning that this country is going through, and we realized that housing justice, because we're in the housing space, was something we wanted to be even more thoughtful and spend more energy and time on. We built on our Birdseed Foundation and decided to earmark several $100,000 to make grants to first-time home buyers in Washington, D.C. who are Black and brown, who are otherwise not as able to make that down payment in our area. And so we've now given 9 awards to families. We've had several closings, and we know that we've been able to make a strong difference. We've been able to attract a lot of additional funders for that program. And so Birdseed now, I think, is making a big difference in helping people become first.
Is there any competitor that you have that has that same positioning?
No.
I've never heard of it.
No, and that program in particular, I mean, talk about marketing. I mean, we've been featured in Forbes and Fast Company and the Washington Post. There was a feature in NPR last Friday about one of our winners and us, and just the visibility that we've gotten from that program. And when we started the program, or we built on it to fund down payments, it was intuitive for us, and we didn't bother to study whether or not there were other programs like it. I assumed there were, and in fact there weren't, because the program that we offer $10,000 to $15,000 grants, and there are really no strings. So there's no accountability on the part of the buyer. I mean, what we want is just for people to get a windfall and buy a home, and that's pretty much all we need. We ask them to be part of a press release, and after that, we just want them to have a great life. We'll help them if they need support on maintenance and other things that we've learned how to do. But there's no, it's not a loan that's forgiven over time, which is traditional for down payment assistance programs. This is just a no strings grant. And as we found out, it's the only one of its kind in the country.
I guess the difficult part is, how do you choose? What's the criteria?
It's tricky. Yeah. So what we've done is we put together a really dynamic and very sophisticated board of advisors in the community who are very good at what they do. And what we created was a rubric that has us evaluate grant applicants based on impact. And so we know everyone should qualify to buy a home. If someone wants to buy a home, we want those folks to buy a home. But which applicants are we going to have the most impact with? So will applicants, are they first-time homebuyers in Washington, D.C. and first-time homebuyers in their family? Are their children going to be closer to a school that they want to be at? Are they going to be closer to school? Like, how large is their family? So we look at it from an impact perspective. And I think that's done a nice job of making sure that we're allocating those funds as reasonably and as fairly as possible.
Great. My goodness. You know, it's so funny that you have fallen into your niche and which has become your differentiator because of, you know, who you are. And so I often talk about the differentiators that are, you know, the DNA of the founders. So, you know, Richard Branson, the crazy guy who's jumping out of airplanes in a wedding gown, it's because that's how he was. Or, you know, Anita Roddick, who, you know, founded the Body Shop, and she was an animal activist, and she was the first ever in the industry to do no animal testing. So it's always, and the pioneers are always falling into their niche, just like you did, and it's been wildly successful, it sounds like. But for those people who can't even understand how to do that, that's where, you know, what I do comes in, is we actually either create a niche or find a gap in the market where there is such a huge need for that around what you do, of course, and then we position and package you into that gap in the market. But you've done a fabulous job, even though you've fallen into it through your own DNA and your own preference. That's amazing. Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about marketing. I'm trying to understand, who is your target? It sounds like it's multi-pronged. So tell us about who are your target prospects, and how do you market to them?
Yeah, love that question too. And that's changed over time. So, you know, as it should, if your company is growing, we've really started to think of ourselves less as a real estate management company and more of a lifestyle company. And we're interested in making people's lives easier in their homes at every stage of life. And so, you know, we'll be your property management company when you're maybe a tenant in your 20s and you're just out of college or just in college or a young professional. But let's say you move on and decide that you want to buy a condo and kind of move up in the world, and it's possible that we may manage the building that you're in. And so we have that management relationship with you. And then let's say that, you know, you're busy and traveling all the time and you have no time or resources time-wise to manage all the details of your home. And so we have a product called Birdwatch, and that's a property management tool that we offer for people that live in and own their homes. So you don't need to have a landlord, you'll just call us and we'll kind of tackle all the things that come up in your home. And so we'll follow you through that stage of life. And then let's say that you move on from your condo and you don't want to sell it, you want to keep it. And so you need someone to manage that property. So you go back to the first company, and so we'll manage that property for you. But then you move on, maybe you get married and have kids, and you're back to needing someone who can help you manage all the things going on in your home. So we really want to grow with you as your lifestyle changes, so that we can manage your home so you can deal with the things that matter most to you in life. And that has been, you know, a lot of proof of concept, a lot of sort of testing what works and what people are attracted to with our business. We created a brand that is intentionally very intriguing, very attractive. We really doubled down on images that were beautiful and spaces and places that people could really identify with, regardless of who they are and where they are in our region. And so people can kind of identify with that brand, whether they're young or whether they're older. They look to us to be that sort of assist when it comes to making life and home a lot easier and a lot better. And so in that way, we've really wanted to try and increase the reach that we have. And so initially we might have looked at our key demographic as someone sort of newer to the rental scene and sort of a young professional and whoever owns those properties, since we manage on behalf of investors. And now we really kind of look at basically sort of any group as a potential client base for us. As long as they're interested in high quality housing, then we're here to help them.
So it sounds like you have different sub brands for different groups, but it sounds like there's two key primary groups. One is like the people who own their own homes would hire you, but then it also, while they're renting, it would be the actual property owner who would hire you, because you know the tenant has no real bearing about. I mean, they're the pain, but they're not the purse, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so that then do you have, obviously you must have separate marketing funnels and tools and messaging for two different stakeholders. Is that right?
You know, I would say that most of the marketing we do is crafted to be really pretty universal.
Mm,
We're looking at things that people find interesting in our space. One of the things that we've done, I think, to differentiate ourselves is just we're really a DC expert. You know, being in Washington, DC, and being a Washingtonian is a pretty unique proposition. The city is very intriguing, very interesting. It's very political. It has a very unique landscape. And we go out of our way to know it very, very well. And so I would say a lot of people in the area, even if they're not clients, really look to us for ideas around how to make the most of the city. And so we do that by having a very strong Facebook following, a very strong Instagram following, a very strong presence in all social media by being out and about. We have branded cars all over the city, tote bags, t-shirts. And it's so funny, after 12 years, people still will send me a picture of one of our trucks and one of the birds, wherever. So like, I just saw one of the birds. And I think, gosh, this is never going to get boring for people to spot one of our birds. We have large format murals on both of the buildings that we own in the city that have become very iconic in Washington, D.C. So even being part of the art landscape is something that we're all about. And so I think we've just tried to emerge as kind of iconic in and of ourselves within our city. And that has paid dividends for sure.
I mean, it sounds like there's enormous brand equity for sure. And it sounds like there's enormous visibility and recognition. And I guess the only, fine point that I would put on it as a strategist would be to accelerate. If you had one last dollar, where would you want it to be accelerated? And then that's where I would squeeze it into a little bit more of, who do you want more? Are you looking for the developers, or are you looking for more homeowners? Like where is the one priority where you would like try to double your business in the next year over and above what you're already doing? Because there's obviously a base of growth that's coming from this visibility. But if
Yeah.
you needed to like offshoot into accelerated growth in one area, where would it be? And of course, that would have to do with probably like post COVID, what's happening in the industry right now. Commercials down, with the upside and kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that's great. So being a very wise lady about marketing, I'll ask you, what is the biggest mistake that you've made in your marketing?
I honestly can't think of one, to be honest. I think we've been so authentic and so intentional about everything we've done. I can't look at any moment and say, oh, well, that wasn't the right decision to make. I think that there are times in which we might have spent more when we had the money to spend. We really steered away early on from ever spending money on marketing, and instead spent money on things that created visibility, a lot of which included philanthropy. And I have no regrets about that. I think I could have and should have likely spent a little bit more on some traditional marketing earlier on to get more market share. And wish it, if I had gone back, I had earmarked some more dollars for that. And while I wouldn't call that a mistake, maybe it was just a longer pause than it should have been. But we also decided to spend those dollars on bonuses for our staff. And so I think in that sense, that was also good for marketing, because if you have a staff that stays put and a business that can be tricky, then you're also building reputation for your brand in that way as well.
Yeah. And so I remember reading your form, and one of the mistakes that you talked about in there was discounting services, but that was probably a very long time ago, right?
It was. And, it's hard to recover from discounting your services, right? So like, I think people, when you offer a discounted rate on a high quality service, then people don't perceive you as being a high quality service. And we gave up on that early. I said, I'd rather manage fewer properties at a higher rate than twice the properties at half the rate. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like, the scale is just is going to be crushing. And so volume isn't always the business that you want to be in. We did have some moments where, I had a large scale client for us that, he played hardball. We were really in a period of time in the company where we needed to add a lot of team members. And we had to, try and find the best way to make sure that we're making payroll. We added a client that really squeezed us on our rate. And we were kind of, I think, maybe a year into that engagement, and just doing the math and realized this is not penciling out for us.
Yeah.
And so I just terminated his contract, and he lost it. He said, he was like, this is a bait and switch. And I said, no, it's not a bait and switch. It's just the reality that like, I can't serve you well with this price point. And you were clear when we engaged with you that this was your top dollar. And I said, our entry point right now is double what you're paying. So I'm not even going to try and negotiate with you. We're not going to get anywhere with that. I think you need to just hire a full-time person that you manage that handles your portfolio. And it's not, and we'll give you a lot of runway. We're not going to leave you in a lurch. We're going to give you lots of runway, and I'll even train the person that you hire, but we can't, this is a losing proposition for us.
Yeah.
And he came back around and said, I'll pay the full rate. And he keeps adding property to his portfolio. And, you know, that was hard to do, to risk a big book of business, knowing that that was going to, you know, potentially create, you know, pretty significant income gap for us. But I think it led to the right outcome for us. And sometimes people just need to be reminded that your service is worth it. I think it's also, you know, he's a much more respectful client than he was initially as well. I think he understood our value after a while.
I bet he did.
When he tried to do it on his own, he's like, oh, wait a minute.
I bet. So that's wonderful. Do you have any parting advice for our viewers and listeners about marketing?
I do. You know, if marketing is really about visibility, then think about all the ways you can create visibility without spending money, and also by doing good. You know, I'm never going to get away from the idea that when you're making a contribution to your community, and investing in the city or community or area that you're in and want to be part of, the goodwill you'll get from that. Goodwill and marketing can actually be the same. So don't be afraid to say, I'm going to invest some time and money in something that may not look like it's going to get me where I need to be, but eventually it will.
That's wonderful. And how could people reach you, Lisa?
You can find me at our main website, which is flock-dc.com, or you can just send me an email at lisa@flock-dc.com.
Perfect. Thanks so much for being a guest.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.